Hello everybody, welcome to Bourbon over headlines, where your headlines are from meat. I'm out on my patio today, a little different area, having a cigar. As you can see, this is a Buffalo Trace cigar. But real quick, before we begin, let me ask you a question. Here's the question. What famous incident in 1916 inspired an award-winning book, an Oscar-winning movie, which was called the first summer blockbuster? We stew on that as we get to our stories. First story. Lieutenant Plum, first in air race between Toronto and Mineola, which was for 1919. So, remember, after World War One, okay, the Wright brothers invented flying in 1903. World War One was really the first time it was used in any major thing. So after World War One, it had to find its role. What was it going to do? So they started doing like air derbies and air races, trying to figure out what the capacities of these planes were. So we have the Great International Air Derby of Aerial Derby of 1919. Just to go over this a little bit here, I'm not going to read it word for word. Basically, June 25th, the announcement of the International Air Derby, which would start simultaneously from Toronto to New York, Mineola Field, so Mineola Field. The Prince of Wales was to Toronto, so the Prince of Wales in 1925. And General William Mitchell was a New York start. The prize of $10,000 was offered by John Bowman, the president of the Hotel Commodore in New York, which is still there, by the way. The prizes were for speed and performance based on a handicap formula. And it was promoted as the biggest aeronautical sporting event in history. So basically, you had different categories based on how fast you were, how well the plane performed, what metrics it made, and there was $10,000 award to the winners. It was the American Flying Club in New York and the Aerial Club of Canada. The contestants started simultaneously from both things in a round-trip circuit with compulsory stops at Buffalo, Syracuse, and Albany. Just under 1,100 miles was traveled. As I said, various things were done. This is a way to show off the durability of the plane, certain engines, certain types of planes, what was reliable, what wasn't. This was a great way and they did this for years. I mean, of course, in 1927, Lindbergh did the solo thing from Atlantic. So, here's a way to only show the public what airplanes could do. This is a way to keep airplanes in. But it says Lieutenant Plum finished first. So, Mineola, New York, 3 entrants, all-American servicemen, had finished the aerial derby. Plum, Maynard completed their round trip with Major Shorter, and in his Toronto. So one went from, they did round trips. They won the race. They won their prizes. There were prizes for the military people and the civilian people. That was what they did. So next up is something called female confidence. So let's read this and see what. I'm not sure if this is a real story or if this is a joke. You'll find out when I get female confidence. I shall never scold my husband again for spending too much time at the club. Tell me about it. Well, last night a burglar got into the house and my husband knocked him senseless with a poker. I've heard several men speak of him as a poker expert. He's evidently been practicing at the club for just such an emergency. He ain't playing that type of poker at the club, lady. Whether this is a joke, it wasn't in a joke type of paper in the joke section. But I guess the female didn't realize that there's a card type of poker. So before we go to the next story, let's just go ahead and do a little bit about Augusta, Maine. It is the easternmost capital of the U.S., which presumably would make it the closest capital to Africa because geographically Maine, believe it or not, Maine is the closest state to Africa. Yes, it is. So it was originally settled, the first settlers came in 1607. Yes, it's an old area. In 1628, Kushnak became a settlement. There was people there off and on. Their trading post is abandoned. In 1701, Fort Western was built, which was the first permanent settlement. And in 1754, it changed its name to Hollowell. No, matter. 1754 was Fort Western, and that's 1704. 1754. In 1771, it changed its name to Hollowell. And in 1771, in 1797, they split, and Harrington changed its name to Augusta, and in 1827, it became Augusta, Maine. Now, from probably the 1860s to the early 1900s, 1910s, 1912s, maybe a little later, there were fires of cities all over the place because everything was built. Most buildings, except for maybe the churches, maybe some churches, but churches, public government buildings like state capitals or post offices were built of wood. So when a fire hit, it wiped out buildings. Same with Augusta in 1865. There was a fire that wiped out 100 buildings. But by 1890, the first trolley was around. And of course, trolleys in all areas got replaced by public transportation and buses. Back then in the 1910s, it was about 13,500. Right around 19,000 now in population. Of course, Maine, being the capital, it's not the biggest city. Most capitals aren't the biggest city. In their state, Portland is, I believe. So, now, of course, we're drinking bourbon on this show, which for many years in Maine wouldn't be allowed. Would not be allowed to drink bourbon because they passed the Maine law of 1851. I alluded to this earlier in a TikTok video, in a short. This has to do with the Napoleon of Temperance. That's right, the Napoleon of Temperance, Mr. Neil Dow, who was, for whatever reason, a temperance guy. Now, so Maine law of 1851, he was instrumental in doing that. It was passed by the Maine legislature in June 2nd of 1851. It was the first major state prohibition law, and it remained in effect in some state or form until prohibition was repealed nationally in 1934. So from 1851 to 1934, in Maine, some level of form drinking was illegal. It was allowed for medicinal purposes and manufacturing purposes. So that's how they got around that. Doctors got medicinal alcohol. Yeah. Other states, especially the New England area, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, all tried to, at various points, at various times, tried to pass similar versions of this law all in the 1800s. Pretty much, some passed for a short period of time. They got repealed. But there's an underlying current with this. I don't like it into politics, but this is the 1850s, so this isn't me. A lot of this, especially if you read what was going on in Mr. Dow and what he was doing, he would be what we consider today anti-immigrant, especially back then Irish immigrants who tend to be the ones who drink. Sorry for the stereotype, but the Irish are the ones who drink. And so he felt that these immigrants were coming in, drinking, creating crime, creating all this issue, bad for society, so he decided to be a temperance person. So there were a lot of, especially Irish immigrants, other immigrants from that area, started doing protests and stuff, which culminated in the Portland Rum Riot, not the Augusta, the Portland Rum Riot of 18 something. I think it was 1860 something. I didn't write it down because it wasn't a part of Augusta. But it was a Portland Rum Riot that sort of tried to change the tide, really didn't do it. Now, Neil Dow, for all his faults, served in the American Civil War with distinction. Like most politicians, he had some sort of scandal when he was in politics. This had to relate to Treasury funds in a financial scandal in Maine. So he had his faults, Was he a good guy? Did he do it? Did he go too far? Maybe. I don't know. But he was called the Napoleon of Temperance. So that should tell you something. So, going from Neil Dow, we're going to go, and the Napoleon of Temperance, we're going to go to rubbish and trash. That's right. Rubbish. Here's your little story. Not really a headline, just a little blurb in the paper. Just in consequence of the promiscuous dumping of rubbish, the promiscuous dumping, I didn't know dumping of rubbish could be promiscuous, really now. On the part of some people, the Board of Health warns that people dumping rubbish from any kind, in any place except the regular city dump, and announces that anyone found guilty of doing so will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. So no littering. No littering. Ever. Understand me? No littering. Also, I did 1912, 1916. I did a little earlier than normally. I've been country in the 20s, but this week I did the 19 teens. So this is 1912. It's the last day of the Olympiad. So the Olympics, 1912 Olympics. Why do you think that's important? Well, that was the rise and gave us the national conscience of Jim Thorpe, one of the greatest athletes. In fact, he was named the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century. He was. He won the pentathlon and the decathlon. Also, Jim Thorpe is a great football player, Hall of Famer. Played baseball, played football. One of the first to do that. Controversy surrounding him was he was stripped of his medals because they found out that before the Olympics he had played some semi-pro or professional baseball. And back then, that was a no-no. Remember, until 1992 when the Dream Team, you couldn't be professional and play in the Olympics. It was all amateur-based. So no NHL players, no NBA players, no MLB players, nothing like that. All amateur players. But also, interesting fact is this is the first Olympiad that had women's swimming and diving. It was also the first. It was the modern pentathlon, which was shooting, riding, cross country running, a bunch of other things. And a couple of those horseback riding. A couple of those got put into biathlon later on. But speaking, we talked about planes in World War One. We have a World War II connection in the 1912 Olympiad. General George Patton, yes, that Patton, finished 5th in the modern pentathlon. But here's the thing. The first 4 competitors were all Swedish. He was the first non-Swedish person. Sweden took 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th, 7th, and 9th. Think about that. They still... Of course, this Olympiad, the people who do it were trying to sort of skew the tables to get Nordic sports into the games, and so people know Nordic sports. First games that had women's swimming and diving also had some art competitions. I don't know how you put art in the Olympics. How do you judge art? That's pretty. No, that's not pretty. I don't know what you judge brushstrokes. It was weird. Tug of war was an Olympic game for years. That's a sport I want to bring back. Let's bring back tug of war. Start right here, right now. Someone start the petition. Tug of war. That's the next great Olympic sport. Let's bring that one back. But even King Gustav basically told Jim Thorpe that he was the greatest in 1912 when he got his medals from him. So that's the last day Olympiad. The U.S., if you want to know, finished second in medals behind Sweden by 1, 65 to 64. Now, we got cigars, we got bourbon, okay? But do we have free smokes? Do we have free smokes? They do for cigar factory workers. It's provided under the new bill, which the House passed Tuesday. So a government agency said that cigar factory workers get free smokes. That would never, ever happen today. In fact, today they probably tell them no smokes even if you work a cigar, you're not allowed to smoke at all. Probably what happened today. Now I've been putting this one off, but this is in 1916 off the shore of Jersey, but the sharks were swimming around New England, but off the shore of Jersey, there were a rash of shark attacks. U.S. government will try extermination of sharks off coast. Now this is in the Augusta Maine paper, okay? The federal government today canvassed the resources for combating the invasion of the North Atlantic coast waters by sharks. President Wilson and his cabinet discussed what could be done to prevent more tragedies of the recent variety. There were several people killed, a lot more injuries. We'll get back to this in a moment. Using the Coast Guard along the Jersey Shore. Okay, the Coast Guard and the life-saving services were ordered to assist in shark extermination of every way possible. The Brewer fisheries, yada yada. Basically, they think it was a great white or a bull shark or both that was attacking people. Whether or not it's a direct thing, the thematics of this is that the local people, the local government, the local law enforcement hid the severity of attacks from the people because of terrorism. Thematically, a lot of the plot points mirror Jaws. There's a dun 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 dun. It mirrors Jaws. Quint was based off a guy who caught a shark in 1964. Now, Peter Benchley's book, I think, was written in 67. Movie was made in 1970. Jaws, Steven Spielberg's one of Spielberg's first major movie, first summer blockbuster. So, 1916 attacks thematically inspired Jaws. So next time you're in the water, remember what could be lurking. That's all I have for today, I think. Let me double check. Yeah, so we have promiscuous trash dumping, free cigarettes, and the inspiration for Jaws, with a couple with Jim Thorpe and General Patton thrown in. So, until next time, my friends, be neat,